Hello everyone and welcome back to the giant Minecraft tree tutorial. In the previous episode we talked about how to build the base of the tree, the basics of building the tree itself. That is the tree that I built in the last episode. So as you can see, we only have 3 branches. I didn't want a whole lot of branches when a tree is this big. It's not really necessary. If you want to put in a whole ton of branches, go right on ahead. But today we're going to talk about how to put in the leaves. So I'm going to be putting in oak leaves, and I'm going to be putting in exclusively oak leaves. I don't really like mixing leaves, even though the tree is massive and mixing the leaves would work on that big of a scale. I am not a big fan of it. So in order to get started, you have to consider where all of your branches are, the heights that they're at and how far out they're going, how big your canopy is going to be, how broken up your canopy is going to be, what kind of a canopy you're going to have. Again, I encourage you to go into Google and search for trees and just look through all the different pictures of trees, their leaves, and how you want them to be. Hopefully you already have the tree that you're trying to build, because the branches that you made are very determined by the canopy and all of that. So my canopy is going to be very large, it's going to be very tall, and it's going to have some hangy bits on it. But if you're looking at my branches, so this is obviously my lowest branch, whereas those two are essentially the same height and off in relatively the same size, whereas this one is kind of off on its own. So I'm going to start with this one first, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down just a little bit below my giant branch, and then I'm going to just make a straight line outwards. So of course, if you're in survival mode, you're just going to be bridging your way out with these leaves. But what you want to do is you want to get a distance away that when you step back, it looks like that would be a natural reach for the canopy to go that far. So I think I want to take mine. I'm going to take mine out a little bit further because it is going to be a decently good sized canopy. And what you're kind of thinking of is, imagine all the teeny tiny branches that are inside of trees that you normally don't see. You look at the tree and you see the big branches, which is what we have here, and then you have all the hidden little branches that are on the inside. So you want to imagine there's a little branch basically that comes from here out to here and has all of the leaves. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to work my way around the sides until I get basically a circle. I want it to come in, not entirely, but I want to close in the canopy that I'm making. So I'm going to bring it around slowly and consistently. Now I want it to come out more than I want it to come in. So of course I'm going to go longer in the direction that I'm traveling than I am closer to the tree, if that makes any sense at all. And then as I start to get more around to the other side of the tree, of course, I'm going to change up my technique a little bit to where now I'm placing leaves on a different side. So whereas over here, I don't like that one, whereas over here it would be out left, or well, I guess we could say forward left, forward left, forward left. And then now over here, it's going to be as I'm facing a different direction because we're traveling now a different direction. It's forward right is going to take me out a little bit from the tree. So the next thing that you're going to do, and I didn't mention it, but of course you probably don't want your leaves to be a perfect circle. So don't go look up a circle generator and make your leaves that way, because then it's going to look too perfect. We want our tree to have flaws. We want our tree to be imperfect because that's going to make it more realistic like a normal tree would. So what we need to do now is we need to decide the height of this section of the canopy. So that is the point where this giant group of leaves basically is going to come up to. And for mine, it's going to be a little bit tall, but then we also have those which are going to come up even taller. So we have a couple different sections of leaves, so to speak. But the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to just begin leveling up all the way, and I'm not going to do it just one at a time staircases like this. Sometimes it's going to go up by 2, sometimes it might go over by 2. It depends on the height that you want, much like when we were building our tree and our branches. So if you need it to go really high in a short amount of horizontal space, then of course you're going to go over by maybe 1 and then up by 2 or 3. And as you're going up, you just want to alternate. You don't want it, again, to be perfect. You want it to look like it's a tree. You want it to have and take on different shapes in different spots and not be just this gradual incline. So that right there is going to be the peak of this entire canopy section. Now this canopy over here, this part of the canopy is going to go higher than that, and then what will happen is this one will come down and meet into that. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to divide it into sections. So I'm going to come over to here, and basically I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to meet it up to right there, which actually is going to be a little bit difficult. So let's get in a straight line to make it a little bit easier, and we'll meet it up right here. And we'll talk about how to do that section in a minute. So as you start getting closer and closer, you want to adjust your branches, or excuse me, your canopy to be at a level that's going to meet up with the lower section that you're connecting. So for example, right here, it's all of a sudden I've had to go horizontal, which is okay if you want a really curved top, but if you look right here, I have a very peaked top, so I don't really like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to kind of graduate it a little bit better so that we meet up with the top in a better fashion than what we already have. Now then, once you have a few sections, a few lines that are going up, these are going to be basically your guidelines. So what I'm going to do now is coming down here next to my center one, I'm going to pick a side, and it doesn't matter which side, and I'm just going to slowly work my way up to the top. And what I'm going to do is in some places I'm going to match it like I have already, and then in other places I'm going to make it a little bit different. So for example, right here I'm going to make it a little bit flatter and then come up. We're going to come up again, make it a little bit flatter. And what you're doing as you do this is you're slowly giving your canopy a shape, a curve to it. Now, if I want to, like right now, you can see that I'm slowly bringing an indentation to this side. But if I don't want to have a super steep, sharp line at the top, what I can do is I can adjust my line as I'm building it. So I'm coming in, I want to keep coming in, and keep in mind, you may come into some spots like this right here where I have a gap, and all I got to do is just fill that in like so. We'll fill that one in right there. Okay, so I've made this a very sharp curve in, but now I want the top of it to still match up pretty well. So what that means is I'm going to have a very sharp line here, and then I'm just going to marry it up basically with the rest of the leaves prior to it. So that you can see right here, we have a very deep slope, and then it gets sharper and sharper until it matches up with right here, and then it's not actually sloped at all, it's actually curved, meeting up with the original leaves. As you're working through your columns, so to speak, you want to keep in mind, one, make sure you're working from both sides. So you see how this one, I'm slowly closing it in by both sides. I'll do the same thing when I come to do this side, is I'll do a little bit here and then I'll do a little bit here. You could just work from one end all the way around to the other, thinking, you know, that you're going to have one gradual shape and consistency, but I've found it's much easier to work in from different angles, and the reason is that gives you a much more organic shape. So right now, as you can see right here on this part what I have is a very, very short distance to go from our bottom up to here. Whereas keep in mind that if I was consistently coming from here to there, here to there, here to there the entire way, I'm eventually going to get to the point where all I'm doing is going from this spot up like 3 blocks over to this spot. And that's not very easy to keep in mind, the gradual incline. We want to always have in mind that we're building up and not over. And so by consistently going from this side over to that side, what you're doing is you're having the lateral build in mind rather than the vertical build in mind. And so right here, places like this are really good and easy spots for you to try and take on special shapes, because you have such a short space to work with that you can either decide to, go up more than over and then make it super bushy, or to really, really slope it in towards the trunk of the tree by coming laterally in more than you're going up and having really steep edges on it. And as we're getting closer and closer to filling in this gap, let's say you have two very different extremes. Say here it's very concave, right? Curving in towards the tree, and this one is very up and straight, which you can see that mine is not, and that's because I kept in mind how I wanted it to look once it got to here. But let's say yours are very different. How do you fix that? Okay, so looking right here, this is going pretty steeply up. If I want to slowly curve that out over a couple of columns, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a lot more diagonal, just like that. So you can see I've curved it out, and there might be some spots where you have to fill in behind it, but what I've done is I've now made that a diagonal line. Now maybe you can't just straight do a diagonal line like I did right there. You may have to have it be to where you go, so say you go diagonal and then you have to go up by 2, diagonal, up by 2, diagonal. However you can fit it in to slowly lessen the steepness, and then the opposite goes with a curve. So if we come around to here, and you can see I have this really big curve right here. So the way to smooth that out would be to try my best to get it to where it's a diagonal line. Okay, now if I just straight up do a diagonal line like this, it's not going to meet up. But if I say go up 2 and then over and then I do a little bit of diagonal, it's going to marry up a whole lot better. And so if you need to slowly flatten out or graduate or come into a curve or get rid of a curve, that's how you want to do it. You want to try to get down to a diagonal line, and then from that diagonal line what you can do is of course start making your natural shape again and start curving it in a way that doesn't look so diagonal. Now I've finished all of that section. Rather than tie it up to over here, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and start on these taller branches, and that's because tying these into here is going to depend on how this ties into here. So just the same way that we did that one, we're going to want to come over and we're going to want to do this one now. So I've filled in very large areas. Basically, as you can see, it's almost like I've filled in 4 corners in a sense. It's not exactly 4 corners, but yeah, you kind of get what I mean. So then how do we join up each of our major branches? Now, if you have a lot of smaller branches, this really isn't going to be a problem, because you're just going to have all of your smaller branches basically come to the same points for the most part. Now, you may have a few major ones like I do right here, but if you have tons of smaller ones, it's actually less of an issue because you're not going to be consumed with making bunches of leaves around each and every single branch. More so, you're going to do it around all of the major branches. Now, joining these up is actually quite simple. So let's start over here, and what we're going to do is essentially I'm just going to do a temporary straight line, very straight, very ugly, across here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly bring the top of this down to here. So actually my very ugly straight line is a little bit too far away. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. And then what we want to do is we want to consider how steep is this going to drop down. So if we figure down, 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 down. So let's go ahead and we'll bring out this one. And if we're wrong on our slope, then that's okay because we can fine tune it. But so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to, the same way that we've been doing, is I'm just going to bring this up slowly until it meets up with the top of our tree. So then what I'm going to do is, using the same techniques we have been, of course, I'm just going to slowly combine the top of this down to here. And then in the same sense, what I'm going to do is from this line, I'm going to combine this up to here. Now let's talk about over here. How do we join our two levels? Well, that's actually pretty easy. All we're going to do is we're just going to kind of melt the two of them together. I'm actually going to bring this out a little bit in order to help me to do that. But basically what it's going to be like is we're going to have the tree just slowly kind of steps down. Now a little bit of this, a lot of it actually, is in the detailing. But you can see what we have is the tree is going to slowly slope down. So even if I needed it to come all the way down to right here, all that I'm going to do is when joining this part, the higher part, down to the lower part, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slowly transition it up. Now you may need to bring it out a little bit if you have to, but you can see that makes a normal transition. Now I didn't fully do it out, but I'm just kind of giving you the example or something to look at as to if you have an extreme transition, how to do it. And even the way that this is okay because later on I'm going to add in a bunch of hangy vine kind of things into mine that are going to make that look a whole lot more natural.
Only starting that point.
So then in joining up these two branches, you have to make a decision. Do you want this to be one large canopy that you can't tell the difference between the two major branches, or do you want them to be separate? In my case, I want them to be separate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to decide what level do I want them to meet up on. I want them to come down a bit before they join into each other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to, let's see, right there. Yes, right there looks pretty good. I'm going to have them come down to about this level. And what that's going to do is it's going to have there be sort of a division. This one's going to come down to here. This one's going to come down to here. And they're going to meet up just like that. So then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to basically go from right here up to this line that I've created. And remember that none of this is permanent, right? We can break all of these blocks if we have to. So then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come around, and you can go ahead and get rid of those if you want to. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go from my line up to the top. Now you may have to do it relatively steep like I am right now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to work our way down the line, and actually, sorry, remember, we want to build vertically, have a vertical mindset, okay? So then what I'm going to do though is we have to marry up this line with this line, and we're going to use all the same techniques that I've talked about before, where you're going to gradually increase the level. So for example, right here with mine, what I need to do is I need to gradually step up my branches. All right, so every chance that I get, I'm going to raise it by a level. All right here, raise it by a level, raise it by a level, and then we've met up. Okay, so same thing on the next one. And so what we're doing is we're slowly raising it up, and we're making an indentation right here, sort of a valley between the two sets of leaves. So you can see right here, I've joined the two, but it's a very extreme joining, and that's okay, because what we're gonna do is we're just going to keep on extending it out until it makes a bit more sense. So what we'll do is we'll slowly drag it out and connect it up and gradually extend it all the way to there, down to there, and then it's gonna look a whole lot more natural. So before we get there, let me just give you an overview, a look at the top of the tree, where you can see that I've got 3 very defined canopy sections, but even those, they're very lumpy, they're very broken up. You can see that it's not consistent in the shape, and that's good, that's wonderful, because what that does is it gives it the look that, like for instance right here, there's probably a decent branch under that part. This is the highest peak of it, and then over here we have the 2 major branches meeting up, and kind of the leaves are cross-sectioning with each other. And then the same thing down to here, we have this with a bushy section coming down here meeting up with a bushy section right here, and then we have the valley between the 2 major ones intersecting with the valley between those 2 and this one right here. So the top of the canopy is all done on the rough level, and filling in the bottom is going to be dependent on what it exactly is that you want to do with your space. Now, whether you want to make it a large home, whether it's going to be completely empty, whether you have tons of branches or only a few branches. In general, what you want to do, obviously, your tree is not going to be hollow from underneath like this. So the minimum of what you want to do is, now in survival, the easiest way to do this is going to be to come up to here where you have these sections and just start filling it in. Yes, I know, painstaking, incredibly painstaking, but it is what it is, right? So this is the last thing before we're gonna get into the details and making it look absolutely beautiful. So go ahead and fill all of that in as best as you can, as quickly as you can, and then we'll get to how to detail this entire tree and make it look absolutely stunning. Okay, so I just recorded the next segment, and unfortunately I didn't actually record it. I thought that I did. So you can see that we have a lot of really flat areas, and you can see I have some areas where I slowly graduated it into into the next level. So we have from the lower canopy up to the higher canopy, and what I did is I didn't uniformly bring it up. Basically, I applied the same principles that I did up here in order to have it be staggered and at different levels. But I still have a lot of very flat areas, and we still have a lot of areas that are very sharp, like this one right here. And so what I want to do in order to make this look more natural, now my tree is going to be a viney tree. It's going to have a lot of stuff hanging down, and the way I'm going to do those vines is I'm going to pick a spot, and then I'm going to bring down the leaves in a straight line, just like so. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically graduate that. I'm going to make it so that it's gradually takes on that shape. Okay, so it's not just going to be a sharp line, rather it's going to be a slow kind of gradual droop in the tree. And so I'm just going to keep coming down, and the way that you're going to do this in survival, of course, is going to be with scaffolding, lots and lots of scaffolding. And then the same with here as anywhere else, you don't want to have just straight up diagonal lines. So I don't want it to go here, 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 here. Okay, you don't want that. You don't want to have an arrow. You want to have it be rather sharp. You want some, maybe they're diagonal, and then other ones it's going to have gaps of 2, even 3, 4, 5, however many it is, because remember, these are vines that are hanging down, and so your entire tree is not a vine. It's only certain sections are super droopy sections, just like that. And so that looks pretty natural. What I don't like, however, is how much I can see through this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come behind it and I'm going to reinforce it with extra leaves in order to make it look a whole lot thicker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm just going to break up all of these flat areas with random intervals, and I'm going to add some vines in certain places to make it look like the tree is viney and kind of weeping, I think is the term. And it's just going to take a lot of time stepping back a lot of scaffolding blocks, unfortunately, and then thickening up certain areas and blending other areas in order to make them look more natural. So before we had a very sharp incline right here, and now it actually looks like it naturally inclines, other than my vines kind of sweep over the natural incline from one section of the canopy to the other. I've gone around and I placed in a bunch of actual vines, and I'm gonna let those grow, but while those are growing, I'm going to go through and I'm going to start detailing the tree a little bit. Now, if you left your cobblestone in, this will actually be probably a little bit easier for you, and the way that you detail your tree is going to be completely up to you. So just some ideas of what you could do is, one, go through and you could cap off all of your exposed cut planks, logs, with some full bark ones, if that's the kind of look that you want to go for. Another thing that you could do is you can mix up the textures so that they are going different ways. For instance, these are all going down. If I come over to here, now they're kind of going different directions. It all depends on how you want your tree to look. You can mix in some normal planks if you want things to look a little bit different, but if you're going to go with such a look, then you're going to want to keep it consistent. I'm not going to do any of that. You can grab some stripped bark of the darker color or lighter color in order to add in a bit of accent if you want. You can use half slabs in various places if you so desire. And another thing that you can do is you can use trap doors. Because the dark oak slabs do match so well with the color of the bark from the spruce logs that I'm using, I am going to add a lot of those into my tree where it's leaning in order to give it more of a gradual lean. I'm even going to take out some of these logs that I previously placed and put in some half slabs from it in order to, like I said, make it look a little bit more natural. Now I'm going to do it a little bit down here at the roots because I want the roots to really look like they're gradually going down, and we can even do a little bit of this going on in order to make it look like the root is just gradually getting into the ground. I'm also going to come into a couple places like this and add in some stairs. Come on, please. I'm not gonna go too crazy with the stairs. It does look nice in some ways, but we don't want it, see, like this right here, we don't want that. We don't want it to look too steep, too diagonal, and having lots of stairs is going to create that for you. So I'm only going to add stairs in a couple of places in order to keep it from looking too blocky, I guess you could say, too not blocky. I don't really know how to say it, but we don't want it to look too diagonal. So I have given it some time for the vines to grow, and you can see it's added so much to the look of our tree. So what I'm going to do now, because I don't want all of the vines to be the same length and I don't want all of the vines to reach the bottom, so I'm going to go through and I'm going to click with string and replace certain vines in certain places with some string in order to make sure that we have a whole lot of depth with our vines and prevent them from growing past the string. So I just want to encourage you guys to use your imagination. Don't get caught up in whether it looks good right away or not, but see it through. Don't get frustrated and do not quit. That is it for this tutorial, you guys. I really hope that it helps. I hope that you build some amazing and wonderful trees. And if you do, please, 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 please send them to me on Twitter. I want to see some screenshots of the trees that you make. And I want to see some videos. If you're making videos, send them my way. Send me the links, send me the screenshots. That's it for today though, you guys. I am Animus J, and I will see you next time.